Today on Hands on Tech, I got my hands on the Sony a7C tiny full-frame mirrorless camera. You're going to find this a bit interesting. Stay tuned.
This is TWiT.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? I'm Pruitt, and this is Hands on Tech here on TWiT TV. Hope y'all are doing well. I'm unbelievable as always, and once again, I have the honor and pleasure and privilege to be able to get my hands on some pretty cool technology, especially when it comes to content creation products. This week, I'm actually able to take a look at this camera right here, the Sony a7C. Ooh, boy, have quite a bit to say about this camera. So let me just go ahead and knock out the tech specs first and foremost. Okay, so this is a full frame camera, full frame mirrorless camera from the folks at Sony. It is offering about 15 stops of dynamic range. You're getting 24 megapixels on the sensor for shooting stills. You're getting 4K resolution at 30 frames per second. If you shoot in HD, you can get higher frames per second. You can get up to 120 using this S&Q mode. You can also get S-Log3 compatibility, picture profile options with recording your video to make it look really good in post-processing. Overall, it's a solid camera, a solid dadgum camera. But you notice with those tech specs that I read off to you, they sound very similar. Okay, pretty much every little spec that I mentioned in that camera is the exact same thing as one of their other cameras that's just a couple of years old, and that's the Sony a7 Mark III. Well, why did Sony go this route? Why did Sony create this new full frame camera just released a couple of months ago for the masses when they have the a7 III that's still sitting out there with pretty much the same specs? Good question. Well, maybe they wanted to do something about the design and the ergonomics of the camera. Okay, so what do you mean, Ant? Well, this camera is absolutely tiny. There's really no other way that I can put it. And yes, I know I have large hands, but this thing is tiny. You have, okay, so if you have a different group of cameras, you have your point and shoot camera bodies, which are usually fairly small. And then you get into the APS-C size, which is your crop sensor size cameras. And then you get into full frame, and then you get even bigger with cine cameras and things like that. Well, this is a full frame camera, but it's about the size of it's really about the size of an APS-C camera body. And if we compare this to one of my old DSLRs, this is a APS-C DSLR, which is still small by most folks' standards. It's definitely small to me, but it's roughly the same size from a camera body standpoint, minus having the actual mirror apparatus built inside of this DSLR. So it's super duper tiny, which begs the question. Okay, so if this is what you want, why do you want a camera this small? Why not just stick with a point and shoot? Point and shoots are usually a little bit smaller and close to the size at the larger end of the spectrum, but a little bit smaller. Why not go with something like the Sony ZV-1 that I reviewed and demoed back on episode 104, I believe, here on Hands on Tech? It's got plenty of photo capability, plenty of video capability. That's good enough for most people. This, on the other hand, it does give you a bit of a step up from a sensor size, as far as being able to shoot better in low light. But megapixels is the same thing, and megapixels isn't always the thing. But this photo quality is going to look just as good, if not just a touch better. Just a touch better. You still get the same flip out screen for vlogging and things like that. And, again, the question is just, why would you go this route? For someone like me that have large hands, this camera body is not ideal. It's just not. I remember when mirrorless started getting big, several years ago, and Sony was pretty much the king of mirrorless with its line of the A7s, where you had the A7 Mark II, the A7S, and the A7Rs. All of those were outstanding cameras and still are to this day. But in my opinion, they were just way too small. They all sort of felt like this APS-C camera, except they were mirrorless. And I just didn't think that was the way to go. Nowadays, the mirrorless game has started to step up its ergonomics, and they feel so much better. And they tend to feel more along the lines of like this Canon R5. Now, I know this isn't a Sony, but just work with me here for a little bit. But this camera body feels so much better in my hands and in most photographers' hands, quite honestly. This is roughly the same size as Sony's A7 R4. And it gives me a much better comfortable grip. You still have a mirrorless body and all of the technology that comes with being mirrorless. See, look at this thing though. It's so small, and look at how it is for me to grip it. This gap right here is just not quite as deep as the grip gap on this body right here. And that makes a big difference in comfort when it comes to shooting. Then there's the aspect of the actual viewfinder. The viewfinder on the A7C is not right here in the center of this camera body. It's actually off to the left for people that have to shoot with their right eye. That could be fine. But if someone that shoots with their left eye, that could be quite problematic. I don't know if I can do that, but it's totally fine for someone that likes to shoot with their right eye like I do. But yeah, again, the viewfinder probably would be better fit if it was better served if it was more in the center of this camera body. I believe they did not put the viewfinder there because of the engineering gone in to make this body smaller, and they just couldn't put it over next to the actual mount, the Sony E mount on this body. I'm not sure. I don't like that design, but some people just may dig it. Other than that, I do like the fact that they have the knobs on the back and on the top. That just works great for getting through your different modes and cycling through a couple settings. But it is missing one little slider or knob that's normally right about here next to the shutter. A lot of people will use that button or use that knob for cycling through things like shutter speed or cycling through aperture settings, because it just makes it quick and easy, and you don't have to really pull the camera away from your face to change those. You can do it all on the fly. I'm not sure why they took that away on this camera body. I know it's apparent on the A7 Mark III, but again, why? I don't quite get it. Okay, so in general, this camera is really, really nice from a technology standpoint. It's got a lot of horsepower packed into a smaller body. The autofocus system on here is still pretty dadgum good because Sony's autofocus is great with the eye auto detect. Your images are just going to look good. When it comes to shooting video, it's going to look great at 4K, and it's going to look great at a high frame rate if you're wanting to do slow-mo, because again, the processing power inside of this is solid. It is so good. I've played around with shooting some just random videos around the house, not able to get out and about because of the pandemic and the state being shut down and all of that. So just shooting around the house and doing some little minor videos and playing around with the color grade and shooting in S-Log3. It's a thrill, especially in 4K, being able to get that extra resolution out of it. The only problem I had with my video experience is, again, the feel of this thing. It's a little too small, and it's not that heavy. I need it to be a little bit more heavy because it helps me to keep the camera a little bit more stable if I can feel it. You know what I'm saying? And with it being a little bit light, you definitely want to put it on a gimbal, but your mileage may vary. That's just my 2 cents. This thing is nice. The pricing on it is great, but let's look at this compared to some of the other cameras that are already out there from Sony. And again, it just makes me ask, why would you want to buy this particular model? So if we were to start all the way back in the point and shoot side, again, you have the Sony ZV-1 that we previously reviewed. You can get that one for $800. And it's going to give you everything that this camera can do right now. May not be quite as good, but it's still going to be able to give you everything that you need to do. Next, you move up to their APS-C cameras, and that's the Sony a6600. That's their next hot one over there for that product line. And it's going to give you everything this one does is just has a smaller crop sensor size on it and not a full frame. Still good, still able to shoot S-Log, still able to get beautiful portraits out of it and still have the solid autofocus. You just missed a few different dials on the body, but again, that's just a different brand or product line for Sony. Okay, so now that you go back up to their top of the line, if you will, and look at the A7 III, and it's got every single spec that this A7C has, except it has the additional slider knob on the front of it, and it has the viewfinder where the viewfinder needs to be right here in the center of the frame. From a pricing standpoint, the A6600, you can get it for about $1,800, I believe, if I checked here on Amazon, at least at the time of this recording. No, you can get it for $1,700 with a kit lens on it, or just for $1,400 if you get the body only. The A7C, at the time of this recording, we can get this one for $1,800 just for the body only, or if you want to get the kit lens, it's going to cost you $2,100. And the kit lens on it, not quite my favorite. The focal length is just a little bit too tight for me. But if you want to step up and go to the A7 III, you're going to pay the same price, maybe $100 more for the kit lens that comes with that one. Let me go right back to the kit lens one more time on this A7C. You know, they're trying to market this for the people that are wanting to be able to shoot stills as well as shoot video and vlog in particular, hence the fully articulating flip out screen on here. You can hold this thing up and vlog with it to your heart's content. But quite frankly, the kit lens on here is just way too tight on its focal length. It has a f4 to f5.6 aperture on it, but the focal length starts at 28 millimeters and goes up to 60. Now, even though this is a full frame sensor, usually when you hear 28 millimeters on a full frame sensor, it doesn't equate to the same as a crop sensor, like say the A6600. That means it would be a little bit tighter at 28 millimeters, usually like 1.5 times more tighter. But this, you're getting the actual full focal length at 28 millimeters. And to vlog, that's not quite enough to hold the camera out in front of you and be able to fill the frame properly. I mean, it's actually overfilling the frame because it's way too tight to you. I have long arms and it still was just way too tight for me. Now, if I wanted to shoot, say, like a Instagram story or a TikTok version, you know, something that's shooting in that portrait mode where it's 9:16 aspect ratio, that's totally fine because you can flip it around that way and still see yourself in the frame with the very screen being flipped out. And that framing is a lot better, but you don't want to do all of your videos that way. You don't want to shoot something cinematic that way. You want to shoot it in a 16:9, you know, widescreen aspect ratio. No, I think they missed the mark on that. I think they missed the mark. But that is it. I just wanted to say, you know, this camera it's a great technological feat because you get a lot of horsepower and a lot of tech just packed into this really, really tiny package. That's great. Good on you, Sony, for that engineering, minus that viewfinder. But I just don't know if I can tell people this is the camera you should buy. It makes me think about the days of the Canon EOS RP full frame mirrorless camera that was tiny. It was not as tiny as this one, and it did have a lot of limited capabilities from a video perspective and frames per second as far as shooting stills and burst mode stills. But it actually felt okay in my hands. It was small, but it actually felt okay. This one was a little hard. This was a little hard to play around with. I'm glad the image quality on this thing was quite stellar and looks great. But if you got large hands like me, this is going to be hard to work with. All right. So that is going to do it for this week's episode of Hands on Tech, folks. Feel free to reach out to me with your thoughts and comments on the Sony a7C. You can find me over on Twitter and Instagram. On Twitter, I am @_Pruitt. And on Instagram, I am @_Pruitt. I would love to hear from you. Also, make sure you subscribe to my show, Hands on Photography. That's twit.tv/hop, twit.tv/HOP for Hands on Photography. Until next time, folks, you all safely continue to create and dominate. Take care.
keep up with all the hottest tech news and gadgets, visit twit.tv. There you'll be able to find and subscribe to all our tech shows. Thanks for watching Hands on Tech.